In this video, I'm going to talk about the importance of background knowledge. Of course, when we're talking about learning and remembering, we want our students and ourselves to be able to go beyond just rote memorization. We don't want to just teach a bunch of basic facts. We want to be able to apply information in new situations, make inferences, think critically. But of course, the importance of those things doesn't negate the importance of background knowledge, having a basic understanding of the area that we're trying to learn in, learning some of those facts, and really being able to tie everything together. Both are important. You actually need to know information in order to be able to apply that information. But in this video, I'm going to just try to do a little demonstration just to show how important background knowledge is. And this idea that we need some background knowledge to be able to take in and better learn and remember new information. So to do this, I'm going to do a little demonstration. It's a portion of an experiment that was conducted in the 1970s. So in this demonstration, you're just going to listen to me describe a situation, describe something, and your goal is to listen and try to remember as much of this as possible, of course, without writing things down. Okay, so here's the passage. The procedure is actually quite simple. First, you arrange things into different groups. Of course, one pile may be sufficient, depending on how much there is to do. If you have to go somewhere else due to lack of facilities, that is the next step. Otherwise, you are pretty well set. It is important not to overdo things. That is, it is better to do too few things at once than too many. In the short run, this may not seem important, but complications can easily arise. A mistake can be expensive as well. At first, the whole procedure will seem complicated. Soon, however, it will become just another facet of life. It is difficult to foresee any end to the necessity for this task in the immediate future, but then one never can tell. After the procedure is completed, one arranges the materials into different groups again. Then they can be put into their appropriate places. Eventually, they will be used once more, and the whole cycle will then have to be repeated. However, this is a part of life. So now that you've listened to that, how much of that do you think you can remember? And you could actually pause this video and take a blank sheet of paper and just try to write as much of it as you can. There were 14 different ideas or sort of sentences or prompts that I read to you. How many of those do you think you can get? If you're like most people, probably not very many, unless, of course, you've heard this before and you know what I'm talking about. I didn't give you any sort of organizational structure to try to understand this. You have no background knowledge about what's going on in order to integrate this passage and the new information. But my guess is that actually most of you, if not all of you watching this video, have done this procedure probably many, many times. And if you've never done it, you at least have lived with someone who has done it. That's my guess anyway. The whole thing is about doing laundry. So when I say we're talking about washing clothing, doing laundry, that brings up all of this information that you already know. You have an organizational structure, or we would call what we would call a schema or a script for doing laundry. And because you have that background knowledge about doing laundry, or at least I'm assuming that you do, as I read the passage, I'm going to read it a second time, all of this is going to make a lot more sense. And being able to kind of attach it to that schema or that script is going to make it such that you will remember more of the information later on. It's also going to just be generally less confusing. So now that you know that this is about doing laundry, I'm going to read it again. The procedure is actually quite simple. First, you arrange things into different groups. Of course, one pile may be sufficient depending on how much there is to do. If you have to go somewhere else due to lack of facilities, that is the next step. Otherwise, you are pretty well set. It is important not to overdo things. That is, it is better to do too few things at once than too many. In the short run, this may not seem important, but complications can easily arise. A mistake can be expensive as well. At first, the whole procedure will seem complicated. Soon, however, it will become just another facet of life. It is difficult to foresee any end to the necessity for this task in the immediate future, but then one never can tell. After the procedure is completed, one arranges the materials into different groups again. Then they can be put into their appropriate places. Eventually, they will be used once more, and the whole cycle will then have to be repeated. However, this is a part of life. So now reading through a second time, with that schema of washing laundry activated in your mind, it probably made a whole lot of sense. And if I were to ask you to again pause the video and write down as much as you can, which you can do, pause the video, write as much as you can, you'll probably remember a whole lot more. This is why it's so important to have background knowledge. And just saying washing laundry activates this schema for many of us because we understand the process of doing laundry. But if we were to find somebody who doesn't know about washing laundry, maybe someone who's never experienced that before, or if we were talking about a different procedure that was less common, they might still struggle to understand. This is why we can sometimes see really big differences. In many ways, the rich get richer, so to speak, because if you have some background knowledge, some prior information, and an organizational structure to work with, taking in new information, remembering it, being able to apply it in new situations becomes a whole lot easier. If we don't have that background knowledge, or we maybe know a few things, but there's a lack of organization there, that makes it much, much more difficult to take in new information. And so this is why it's essential that we develop background knowledge in our students and also understand where maybe some students don't have background knowledge. This is also important just in general life when we're communicating with one another. Sometimes experts can have this curse of knowledge, right? Where we have these organizational schemas about the things that we are expert in. And when we talk, we kind of make jumps and assumptions because it makes sense to us because we know what we're talking about. Whereas to someone who's a relative novice, at least relative to the expert, they might struggle a whole lot more to take in that information and to kind of figure out what's going on and remember it in a way that's accurate. So I think that this is important for instructors, teachers to think about in terms of their students and where students might come to the table with different levels of background knowledge. It's also important just in communication, whether that be in business or communication among different teachers. The settings really are sort of endless. If one person has a strong understanding of something, experience in some area or a schema that's already built, and the other person doesn't have that same level of expertise, communication can be really difficult. So just a little demonstration about the importance of background knowledge.